Before he was 10 years old, his family was in the middle of a national scandal, his parents thought he was mentally challenged, and he couldn't stop getting in fights at school. But now Roger Goodell is the most powerful man in all of sports, after 30 years of babysitting draft picks and getting rejected by every team in the NFL. So how did he get here? And what was Goodell's secret to rising the ranks of the biggest sports league in the world? Because there was a specific strategy he used that has made him one of the richest figures in sports, while also being hated by over 60% of the NFL. Well, we're about to find out, because this is the forgotten story of the rise of Roger Goodell, commissioner of the NFL. Roger Goodell was born on February 19, 1959 in Jamestown, New York, a small industrial town of just 28,000 an hour west of Buffalo. Goodell was the third of 5 boys in his family, and his dad, Charles Ellsworth Goodell, was a little-known Republican congressman who got elected the year Roger was born. Charles Goodell served in the United States House of Representatives from 1959 through 1968, when he resigned from the House to be appointed as a senator after Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated. This appointment thrust the Goodell family into the spotlight, which was only made brighter when Charles Goodell spoke out against his party on the Vietnam War. You see, Charles was a very curious man who would literally read the dictionary from cover to cover to improve his vocabulary. However, his love for learning didn't seem to get passed down to his son Roger. In fact, Roger would frequently get into fights with classmates and didn't show much interest in school. This even resulted in his parents thinking he had a learning disability, which his brothers bullied him for. So they gave him a number of IQ tests, only to find out that Roger was perfectly normal. He just didn't like school. He did, however, take after his father in one very important way. He cared about doing the right thing. You see, in the 1960s, America was in the middle of the very controversial Vietnam War. Generally speaking, young liberal voters wanted US troops to withdraw from the conflict, while older conservative voters wanted to continue fighting. So when Republican Senator Charles Goodell flipped from supporting the war to opposing it after talking with younger voters, activists, and civil rights leaders, his party turned its back on him. It was even reported at the time that President Nixon put Charles Goodell on his famous enemies list after calling him an intellectual and a loyalist months earlier. This fallout even required the security detail around the Goodell family to be increased, since in the past 6 years, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert F. Kennedy had all been assassinated. And the Goodells were worried that their father could be next after speaking out against the war. But then a year later, in 1970, Charles Goodell lost his bid for re-election after splitting the Democrat and Republican vote in a 3-way race. His only defining achievement while in the Senate was going against his party and sponsoring a failed bill that would have withheld funding from the Vietnam War. A bill that Roger Goodell still has hung up in his office to this day. Because what his dad taught him when he was just 11 years old was to listen to every side of an argument and stick up for what you believe in, even if it could cost you everything. Both of which are lessons that Roger would take to heart throughout his childhood, as he would frequently beat up bullies who would pick on his brothers, later redirecting that energy as his elementary school's safety patrol officer who helped younger kids cross the street. But possibly the most productive use of young Roger's energy was on the football field. He became obsessed with the game growing up in Washington, D.C. and rooting for the Redskins. He even slept with a football starting at the age of 6, and from then on, he was sure he was going to work for the NFL. Maybe one day even becoming the commissioner. But first, he had a chance to play the game himself, and at a pretty high level. You see, once Goodell got to high school, his family moved to New York City, where he attended Bronxville High School. There, he was a 3-sport star in football, basketball, and baseball. He captained all 3 teams as a senior and was even named the school's Athlete of the Year in 1977. On the football field, Roger played running back and safety, but his senior year, he asked the coach to move him to tight end since he felt one of the new students was better suited to help the team at running back. Roger was always one to put the team first, even at the expense of his own teammates. For example, in the 70s, Bronxville high school students had to sign a pledge to stay away from alcohol, drugs, and tobacco, and Goodell took this pledge seriously. He was even known for ratting out his teammates who broke the pledge, always justifying it as the right thing to do, just like his father had taught him. Upon graduating, Goodell had several college offers to play defensive back. He selected Washington and Jefferson College, a small D3 liberal arts school in eastern Pennsylvania, after getting rejected by his first choice Davidson. However, while training the summer before he was supposed to start, he tore a ligament in his knee, and instead of having surgery and rehabbing, Goodell decided to hang up his cleats and just focus on school. something he had never really been good at. But without the distraction of sports, Goodell was able to thrive in his academics, finishing his first semester with a 4.0 GPA to the genuine surprise of his entire family. Goodell himself says that, quote, "My goal was to prove my family I wasn't a dummy. I learned in high school that I was going to have to outwork people. I remember running around the track, training for football, and a faster guy ran past me. I just figured I can outlast him. If I work harder than him, I'll beat him, and to this day I overprepare." And nowhere would that be more true than in his hunt for his dream job. Now, when professors or classmates would ask Goodell what he wanted to do when he graduated from college, he would always tell him that he planned to be the commissioner of the NFL. But before he could do that, he'd have to get his foot in the door. See, Goodell graduated magna cum laude from Washington and Jefferson in 1981 with a degree in economics, a far cry from his childhood when he was getting tested for a learning disability. And upon graduation, he immediately started writing letters to every team in the NFL, the league office, and even the commissioner himself, Pete Rozelle, asking for an interview. He even wrote a letter to his father saying that if there was one thing he wanted to accomplish in life besides becoming commissioner of the NFL, it was to make him proud. Goodell ended up sending 40 letters in total during the summer of '81, and eventually one of them reached NFL Executive Director Don Weiss in New York City. Out of formality, Weiss wrote Goodell back, telling him to stop by if he was ever in the area. But little did Weiss know Goodell planned to take him up on that offer, and immediately upon receiving a response, Goodell called Weiss and told him that he was in town and was available to come in the following morning. In reality, Goodell was 7 hours away in Pittsburgh working some other internship, but he immediately left and drove through the night to New York City for an informal interview. After talking with Weiss, Goodell followed up with several more letters, and then the following summer, he secured a 3-month internship in the NFL league office. 6 months later, he was offered another internship, but this time with the New York Jets. He accepted and spent the 1983 season clipping newspaper stories on the team and following around the team's first-round draft pick, Ken O'Brien. O'Brien recalls yelling at Goodell, saying things like, "Don't tell me what to do, who are you?" And apparently able to hold his own, Goodell would yell back, "Who the hell do you think you are? This is what I told you to do." This earned Goodell the respect of both the players and the coaches in New York. In fact, he was even offered a position on the Jets coaching staff the following season. But instead, Goodell decided to return to the NFL offices in 1984 as an assistant in their PR department. One of the factors in him making this decision was so that he could live at home with his mom, who had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. See, Goodell's parents had separated when he was younger, and his other siblings had moved away, so he was the only one left to take care of his mother. But by late 1984, the cancer had spread to her brain, and she passed away that year when Roger was just 23 years old. Nevertheless, Goodell pushed forward with his career in the league's PR department, and his first task, persuading college players not to sign with the rival upstart league USFL. You see, the USFL had started the year prior to fill a gap in pro football that existed in the spring and summer. Immediately, the league began attracting top college talent, signing 3 consecutive Heisman Trophy winners by offering them lucrative contracts. And it was Goodell's job to convince these players that this money was fool's gold. In fact, he would travel with Cowboys executive Gil Brandt to various bowl games to try and convince players not to sign with the new league. And he was successful with some players, but the most notable player he convinced to come to the NFL was a little-known receiver from Mississippi Valley State named Jerry Rice. You see, at every turn, Goodell proved his worth to the league, and by 1989, the NFL had a new commissioner, Paul Tagliabue, who began trusting Goodell with jobs beyond public relations. This included attempting to prevent the Browns from relocating to Baltimore in 1996. But when the team made the move, it was Goodell who brokered a plan to bring them back. He worked for years with the city council and new ownership to get the team a new stadium. And when the Browns returned to Cleveland in 1999, Goodell's reputation as the ultimate mediator was solidified. In the 2000s, Goodell rose to become Tagliabue's right-hand man, which left him responsible for a variety of things, including ensuring that the Rolling Stones' suggestive lyrics in Super Bowl 40 were censored by threatening to replace the band with Stevie Wonder, or by leading the campaign to make every NFL season opener a standalone Thursday night game. Goodell was even the person behind moving the first round of the NFL draft to a Thursday night in primetime, which immediately earned it more viewers than the NBA playoffs that year. And this all led up to August of 2006, when the 32 league owners were set to hold a vote for the next commissioner after Tagliabue announced his retirement. Goodell, of course, threw his hat in the ring. This was his dream job after all, and he had made a career over the past 24 years doing what he tagged as finding better solutions to decades-old league problems. But he was up against 5 other candidates, the strongest of which was league attorney Greg Levy. And in order to win, someone would need 2/3 of the owners' votes, or 21 of the 32. However, Goodell was fighting an uphill battle since many saw him as some kid who just rode Tagliabue's coattails. And after the first ballot, Goodell had only received 3 more votes than Levy. So he decided to appeal to the owners where it mattered to them the most, their pocketbooks. You see, in 1996, one of the league's pioneering new owners proposed a revolutionary idea. Why couldn't teams sell their own sponsorships to earn more money, even if they interfered with the league sponsors? For example, before 1996, the NFL would sell a sponsorship to Coca-Cola and split the revenue with all of its teams. But why couldn't teams sell their own sponsorships to whoever they wanted, like Pepsi in this case, and keep all the money for themselves? The other owners laughed at this idea because it went against how they had always done things. But this brash new owner had one supporter in the league office, Roger Goodell. That owner ended up being Jerry Jones, and once he had Goodell's support, they were able to sell the rest of the league on this idea. And as it turns out, it exploded league revenues, with teams making an extra $2 billion in the 15 years following the change. This anecdote was enough to push Goodell over the edge on the 5th ballot, and on September 1st, 2006, he was named the 8th commissioner of the National Football League at 47 years old. But little did he know, he was inheriting a league on the brink of crisis. You see, Goodell's philosophy as commissioner of the NFL can be described in 3 simple words: protect the shield. Publicly, he said this means safeguarding the game's integrity and making it safer, but privately it means something much different. But however you interpret those 3 words, Goodell has made it known that he's more than willing to do the unpopular thing if he thinks he's doing right by the league, just like his dad taught him to do almost 4 decades prior. And Goodell had the opportunity to test his conviction early in his career. See, during the 06-07 season, there were 50 arrests of NFL players that gave an already violent league an even worse reputation. The hardest hit came when Titans corner Pac-Man Jones was arrested for the 5th time after being accused of causing a riot and shooting in a strip club during NBA All-Star Weekend in Las Vegas. This led to the launch of what the NFLPA and Roger Goodell called the league's new player conduct policy, which essentially granted the commissioner the right to play judge and jury on any off-field incidents. And the day the policy was announced on April 10th, 2007, Pac-Man Jones received a suspension for the entire upcoming season. But he wasn't the only casualty of this new policy, as Goodell also suspended Bengals receiver Chris Henry and Bears defensive tackle Tank Johnson for 8 games during the following year. But the biggest shockwave was felt less than a year into Goodell's tenure when, on April 25th, 2007, police raided Michael Vick's property and found several neglected pit bulls as well as evidence of dogfighting. And just 3 days later, Vick stood face to face in New York City with Roger Goodell and told him that he had nothing to do with the alleged dogfighting ring. At the time, Goodell didn't know what to believe. After all, Vick was on the path to becoming the face of the league, and the electric dual-threat quarterback had just signed a 10-year, $130 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons. But then, less than 3 months later, in August 2007, Vick pled guilty to helping organize dogfighting rings, and the next day, Goodell announced that he'd be suspending the star QB indefinitely without pay. Vick would go on to serve 21 months in federal prison, and he'd be suspended for the first 2 games of the 2009 regular season. To this day, Vick defends Goodell as a good commissioner, even though he was handed out one of the strictest punishments the league has ever seen. Or so he thought, because not 1 month after Vick was pleading guilty in front of a grand jury, another scandal was brewing under Goodell's watch. Now, in my opinion, there's no better snapshot of what the NFL was like in 2007 than Spygate. The Patriots, who had just come off a 16-0 regular season, only to be stunned by the Giants in the Super Bowl, were the embodiment of the must-see entertainment the league was known for. However, on September 9th, 2007, the dark side of the dynasty was starting to show. That's when Goodell handed down the largest fine ever on a coach, to the tune of $500,000, when it was revealed that the Patriots had been videotaping the Jets sideline during the opening game of the 07-08 season. This news shocked the sports world and gave haters of the Patriots the perfect ammo to discredit their success. The organization itself was fined $250,000 and stripped of its first-round pick that year. But then Goodell did something that has defined his career as a commissioner. He destroyed the Spygate tapes. You see, the Patriots were being punished for videotaping the Jets 1 time during 1 game in September, but they had been accused of doing much more than that. However, Goodell's motto of protecting the shield in this case meant not letting the story get any bigger than it already was. So he destroyed any and all evidence of additional cheating as a way to protect the Patriots and in turn protect his league. And this became a characteristic that would end up defining him as a commissioner. If something bad happened in the league, he would use his power to make it go away as quickly as possible, all in the name of protecting the NFL's reputation and in turn its bottom line. For example, NFL Europe was going bankrupt. He shut it down his first year on the job. Players wanted to go on strike, play the 2010 season with no salary cap, and give them a new deal in the offseason. Saints coaches were paying their players to purposely injure the other team, suspend everyone involved for a season, and just move on. Thousands of former players are suing the league because of CTE, settle for $765 million, and don't ever talk about it again. You see, Goodell knew that the league was at its best when people were talking about the play on the field, not all the other stuff. And he was happy to play the villain as long as it meant the attention was eventually getting redirected back to the games on Sunday. But this attitude also came with a price. By 2013, Goodell had a 61% disapproval rating from players, but to him, none of that mattered. Because remember what I said earlier about what protect the shield actually means? Well, while Goodell was suspending players and handing out millions of dollars in fines to clean up the image of the league, he had made a forgotten promise that was slowly starting to come true. You see, in 2010, just 3 years after Roger Goodell took over as commissioner, the league was doing $8.5 billion in revenue every year. It was still the best of the 4 major sports, but for the owners, it wasn't good enough. So in an attempt to emphasize his vision for the league and remind the owners why they picked him in the first place, Goodell laid out the league's most ambitious plan yet: earn $25 billion in revenue per year by 2027. This meant adding $1 billion in revenue every year for the next 17 years, something that is virtually unheard of in any business, much less professional sports. And in the first 3 years of this plan, it didn't even look possible, since it took the league 3 years to earn an extra $1 billion. However, slowly but surely, the NFL got back on track. And then in March of 2021, everything changed. Goodell and the NFL signed a record-breaking 11-year, $105 billion media rights deal with CBS, Fox, NBC, ESPN, and Amazon. And then 2 years later, they inked another 7-year, $14 billion deal with YouTube TV. Each partner is paying the NFL at least $1.3 billion per year until 2033, representing almost $11.5 billion of the $25 billion goal Goodell set. In fact, just the value of the NFL's TV deals every year is now worth more than the entire revenue of the league when Goodell made his original $25 billion promise back in 2010. And there's still more money left to make. Because when the league signed these massive TV contracts in 2021, the NFL had just come off a season where they were responsible for 71 of the 100 most watched broadcasts of 2020. However, last year in 2023, the league accounted for 93 of the 100 most watched US broadcasts. Not to mention that under Goodell's watch, the league has grown its own media arm, NFL Network, into a $1.3 billion per year business. However, even with all this revenue considered, the league is still only earning $20 billion per year. So how is Goodell going to make $5 billion more in the next 2 years? Well, he actually already has a plan that's been in the works since 2013. You see, all the way back then, Goodell knew that the league was going to reach a revenue ceiling when it came to the on-field product. They could only charge so much for tickets and TV rights before people wouldn't be willing to pay any more. So the NFL wondered how they could cash in on the upside of the growth of the sport off the field too. Enter 32 Ventures. This is a venture capital fund owned entirely by the 32 teams in the league. And in 2013, when it first started, the NFL requested that each team seed the fund with $1 million to invest in sports-related companies like Genius Sports, Sportradar, Fanatics, Skills, and Noble. This went so well that the league came back to the teams in 2021 to request another $5 million investment. In total, each team has only invested $8 million into the fund, but today the total value of their investment is estimated to be worth over $100 million each. A 1,150% increase, bringing the total value of the fund across the entire league to over $3 billion. And this is the part of the NFL that is infinitely scalable, since this money is now able to compound and grow faster than any sponsorship or TV revenue ever could. And it's this foresight and focus on making the owners as much money as possible that has helped Roger Goodell become the second longest serving commissioner in modern league history. It's also why the owners are so comfortable paying him a reported $64 million in annual compensation. Now, it's unlikely that Goodell will pass Pete Rozelle as the league's longest tenured commissioner, as he'd have to serve in the role until he's 77 years old. But I'm sure given his record, the owners aren't in any rush to get rid of the PR intern from Jamestown, New York, who's just trying to make his dad proud. Thanks for watching. I do 2 of these videos every month, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an upload, and click on one of these if it seems interesting to you.